Remember that religion, or actually Christianity, was actually recognized as a religion in the 4th century. Prior to that, there were huge pagan worshipping and practicing spiritual practices at that time. Okay, so the celebration of Christmas has evolved dramatically over the centuries and time, blending ancient spiritual traditions, that's Roman traditions, and early Christian theology, and later cultural, commercial influences, right? Understanding its origins helps to separate what Christmas was, what it is now, and how has been evolving in our uh, collective experience on this earth, right? So let's go back to the basis. Now, we all know that when Yeshua was here on this earth teaching people about love and kindness, and teaching them about their own power, right? That they should actually embrace. People were generally practicing pagan worshippers, okay? Worshipping, sorry, or pagan gods, right? They were worshipping pagan gods, all right? So let's go back to the basis here, right? We will go with the beginning. In short, there's no historical evidence to suggest that Yeshua was born on the 25th of December, right? Okay. So the date was chosen hundreds of years later after the death of Yeshua, right? And the early Christian church actually chose that date for a specific reason, not based on scripture, but symbolism and a central cultural strategy, right, that unfolded. The Bible never mentions the date. If you go to all the version of the Bible, there's no date about Jesus' birth, okay? In the Gospels, there's no exact date for Yeshua's birth. As I said, Yeshua, right, aka Jesus, known as Jesus. Clues point on different times of the year. Okay, remember that Yeshua lived in the northern hemisphere. In December, they're experiencing winter. Right? However, in the Bible, it speaks about shepherds were living in the fields. That's in Luke 2:8. In Judea, shepherds typically only stayed outside at night in spring or summer seasons, not in winter. A census required travel would not normally be done in a cold, rainy weather during winter, right? That means that the spring and the early summer or the early autumn were more likely the time of Yeshua's birth, right? So the early Christians never celebrated Jesus' birth. It wasn't part of the celebrations. For the first 200 to 300 years, the focus was on his teachings, right? His teachings and the death and resurrection. That's what the focus was on, basically, for the first 200 to 300 years of the teachings of Yeshua, or aka Jesus, right? Focusing on the early church focused on resurrection, on inner transformation, and the kingdom consciousness, right? So birth celebrations were not part of the early Christianity. They were not part of early Christianity, right? The exact date simply wasn't a priority. His date of birth was not a priority in the early church traditions, right? So why did the church choose December the 25th? Why did the church choose December the 25th as Jesus's birth date? By the 4th century, Jesus' teachings, right, had already went across the whole Roman Empire at the time, right? Remember, the Romans were then controlling the world at that time, or that area of the world. But Romans already had a major festivals, on the 25th. From the 21st, right on to the 25th, the Romans had their own major festivals connected to their own spiritual or religious worshipping, okay, and belief systems. We have the Winter Solstice, right? They celebrated something called the Solus Interveticus, okay, which is a Roman celebration of the sun god, right? Now, the birth of the unconquering sun, as they call it, was celebrated on the 25th of December. It was a pagan celebration